discussion, and this will also, all right, here we go. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Club webinar. My name is Steve Choi, and I have the honor of volunteering as the club's Director of Communications. To ensure that we have the best webinar experience, all attendees are on mute so that we can spotlight our panel of featured speakers. Attendees may submit questions during the webinar by using the Q&A feature. Simply click the Q&A icon at the bottom, type in your question, and click submit. So without further delay, here is your San Marino City Club President, Mr. Lauren Kleinrock.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Welcome all. Glad you could join us tonight. It's supposed to be a good program. Don't want to put any pressure on our speaker, but it's supposed to be a good program. Pressure. Anyway, if you all would just please stand and join me in Pledge of Allegiance, we will take care of that. Neil, ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it
for
stands,
which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, before we actually get into things, I sent a constant contact to you, thanks to Steve's prowess in doing such things. As you probably are aware by now, City Club member Bill Berry passed away on September 2nd. Those who knew Bill will miss his sense of humor. In 1998, he was our City Club president, was a member since 1978. Enjoyed being an escort over many years at the annual November Queen and Court dinner meeting. Loved to crack jokes. He had a very wry sense of humor, but he liked to make people laugh. Sue and his wife, Sue and Bill, and her two children, Stephen and Jill, moved into their house on Lorraine Road in 1974. Bill was also a member of Rotary LA5, Jonathan Club, and the San Marino Community Church, where he was an usher and a deacon. And those who knew Bill will probably, as I do, miss him. He was just a presence that was fun to be around. Okay, we have some new member presentations tonight, and so we're going to get right into those. Robert Tam and Sue Jakubowski, who are directors of membership, will do the introductions for us. And so I understand, Robert, you're going to go first? Assuming Robert's there and hearing me.
Yeah, Robert actually called me and said he was having some technical difficulties getting connected. So perhaps maybe Susan can go first, and then hopefully Robert can join us in.
Okay.
Certainly, I'd be glad to. Thank you. I am delighted that for the first time during our Zoom live, we are introducing two new members this evening. And when the first member asked me to sponsor him, I was delighted to say yes. So I would like to introduce to you Jesse Hung. Jesse has been a resident of San Marino for more than 20 years. He attended USC and received his doctorate degree in pharmacy, and he is the current owner of a number of pharmacies. He is the proud parent of a student currently at USC, his son, and his daughter is a senior at San Marino High School. Jesse is a former member of the San Marino Chinese Club and was also president of the San Marino Chinese School. He served many years on the San Marino Schools Foundation, and among many other activities in his life, he has traveled to more than 30 countries where he engaged in a fair amount of volunteer work while traveling. We welcome you, Jesse, and wish you a long membership at the San Marino City Club.
Welcome.
Yeah, Jesse was on, I think, Steve, he was on as a panelist. I mean, as a part of the audience. I don't know if you were able to switch him over or not.
Yeah, I don't see.
There he is.
I don't see Robert.
There's Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
Hey, Jesse, welcome. Thank you for joining the club. And we can't hear you. So.
Did you want to say anything, Jesse?
He's trying, but I think he's muted.
I think he has to unmute himself.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I can unmute him. In fact, I don't see him connected at this point.
Well, I'm sure he's
Come on.
happy to be joining.
Right now, I don't see Robert on here. Let's see, okay, there's somebody, maybe he's dialing in here. Let me see if I can find Robert.
I love technology at its finest. So for those of you who are listening, this is the new era we're going to be in. So hopefully you're enjoying what you can see and listening to. We will find people because I see our next members waiting. So hopefully we can get past the next technical difficulties.
Well, let's be clear from now on moving forward. The technical difficulties are never on our end. They're always on the
Yes.
other, right? Okay.
I say too.
I'll let people know that. Hey, Julie.
Would you like me to just introduce myself? I'm happy to do that if you'd like.
Can you guys hear me now?
We got Robert now. Yes.
Okay.
Now, for some reason.
Okay,
ahead,
here we
Robert.
go. I'm on now.
All right.
Very good. So our next member is Julie Lynn. Julie is a San Marino graduate from 1994 who later went on to USC and graduated with a degree in business marketing. She's lived in New York and she has 3 children, have ages in grades 5, 8, and 10th grade. Currently, Julie she has a social media platform, which I thought was very interesting, where she hosts a program called, is it Beyond Books? Is that what it was called?
So
Julie?
it's my Instagram handle is the Julie Chan Show, and my website is Beyond the Book with Julie, where I interview a different book author every day on Instagram. And before that, for the past few years, I have hosted either private events or I have interviewed people like Martha Tolles at the Athenaeum for the PCC Foundation, just interviewing book authors to get their backstory, what inspired them to write books, things like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting.
Thank
And we're happy to welcome Julie Lynn to this members, to this club. Thank you.
Thank you. It's confusing because here my name card says Julie Chan. So my maiden name is Chan and my married name is Lynn. So I go by Julie Chan Lynn because I couldn't decide.
Okay, I was confused as well, but okay now.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And I didn't know how to change it on here. So technicality on my part.
No
And you
worries.
make me feel old.
Young again, right, Mr. Kleinrock?
Yes.
Head of athletics.
Yeah, there's a backstory to that. She was at San Marino High School when I was. All right, well, thank you. Great to have you join the club, and we look forward to seeing you one way or the other. So you be well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Steve, I lost you there. I lost the screen anyway. Are we ready to move on?
We are.
Okay, so we're going to do a presentation on our membership slate. And so I think Steve's got something to bring up there. Do you, Steve?
Yep.
There we go. All right, so our bylaws are here in front of you. And really the two that are operative for tonight, we did send you meeting requirement for at least 5 days prior to our September meeting through Constant Contact, the potential slate. And first I want to, well, I'll go through the rest of this so Steve doesn't have to jump back and forth. If you are not one on the slate, which includes anybody that didn't get in touch with me before, if you still want to be a member considered, then you need to send in an application, a petition signed by at least 10 members of the club, and it has to be signed by the person who you are trying to encourage to join. Don't want to Shanghai anybody or make them appear when they do not want to appear. So anyway, I want to present to you the nominating committee, and there are, as you can see in the or you could have seen in the bylaws, very specific who needs to be on a nominating committee. You do have the president and the vice president, the immediate past 4 presidents if they are able and willing to serve, and you have people from at-large, and you can see the at-large members. Carol Blauveld, Kylie Chang, Stephanie Duncan, Janice Lee McMahon, Mike Lynn, Eugene Sun. All did a great job. We got things down. I think we have a great slate of officers for next year.
That event is on the San Marino City Club website. If you click under events, you'll be able to find that. And of course, our website is sanmarinocityclub.org.
Thank you. Okay, and the October meeting is Dr. John S. Mulcahy, who is with the Carnegie Institute. He's going to talk on Eyes on the Universe. It's actually going to be California, Southern California's prominent role in astronomy and things universe. And so it's supposed to be a very excellent speaker. Came to me or our way by way of Sally DeWitt. Sally I've known always to be a person of discriminating taste. And therefore, when she recommended him, it seemed like a good way to go. So we are set for October. We're still working on November. There will be a program, a Zoom program. As I mentioned before, Rose Court is not doing presentations this year. So we have a couple of possibilities, actually alternative choices we can make, and we will do that in November. So now, introduction of tonight's featured speaker. I'm going to have our first Vice President, Kelly Ryan, do that because he's got a little longer relationship with the Honorable Senator than I do. So Kelly, you are on. As he was saying about technology.
And so now I get the reminder that I should talk when I'm unmuted. Now, hopefully everybody can hear me. At least Lauren can because he's taken the hearing aid out. So it's my pleasure this evening to introduce actually probably the busiest senator and busiest politician I know. When you read his biography, it is kind of underwhelming because Anthony really truly is the busiest senator and busiest person I've ever met. I've met him at numerous events over the past several years. I've gotten to know him personally. He's a great father. He's interested in family. He's a great supporter of public education. And he serves more than 1 million people along the 210 corridor. When you think of the 25th district, which is Anthony's district, it covers from Glendora all the way to Burbank. It includes San Marino, which is why he's talking to us tonight. He is a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He's on the Select Committee on California, Armenia, and Artcash Mutual Trade, Art and Cultural Exchange. He's a member of the Banking and Finance Institutions, Governmental Organization, and Insurance Committee. And he knows the name of the game. The great thing about Anthony is it's all about passing bills, and he submits and gets approved a number of bills each year. So with great pleasure, and it's a great honor. And I'm looking now for my spaghetti claw to introduce Anthony Portantino. Anthony, all you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Lauren, for having me at the club tonight, and Stephen for being our tech support. Full disclosure, Kelly's been trying to get me to do this for the last couple years, and I'm really happy that we were able to have COVID bring us all together. See, COVID's been pushing us all apart, but in this case, it brought us all together. And, you know, I am honored to represent the 25th State Senate District. I'm going to edit Kelly a little bit. It actually starts in Upland. and goes all the way to Sunland to Hunga. And it is 1 million people along the 210 freeway largely. And to put it in perspective, a congressional district is 700,000 people. And so a state senate district is actually a third larger, a California state senate district is actually a third larger than a congressional district. Many of you know David Kim from my office, who's on the program here with us. David is my field deputy for San Marino. So from day-to-day questions or issues, he's at your disposal as well. And I know, as many people dealing with COVID in California understand, that a large percentage of our day-to-day casework has to do with unemployment benefits. And we have been trying to navigate as many people as possible through the system. And unfortunately, the system has changed a number of times, and we've been lobbying the secretary as much as possible and deal directly with the folks in the office and facilitate many claims. So if you have issues and you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to David, or if you're like Kelly and you know me, call me up. Lauren, you mentioned Sally DeWitt. I was scrolling through the attendance line to see if she was on the docket tonight, but she's a good buddy as well. And so if you see her before I do, tell her I said hello, because Sally's good people. The state, our district, the 25th district, is really a collection of 18 small towns and communities, and San Marino being one of them. And it has its own small town presence, and I try to recognize that as a legislator. And obviously so much of what we do is our kids orientation and public schools, and I try to be that voice for public education and as much as I can. Our district is served by 5 community colleges. I think there's 11 four-year colleges in my district. And so I really look at it as, including the 5 Claremont colleges and Caltech and Woodbury and everything in between. I really do look at it as a education-centric place. And so that's the lens I try to govern with, and I try to govern with a lens of being a dad. And so some of the legislation I've been pleased to participate in and champion, in particular these days, very important suicide prevention efforts, mental health care, increasing, in years past, increasing budget allocations for special needs students, increasing overall education funding for California. One of the biggest frustrations many of us had this year is in January, we had big plans for this year. We were all looking at a healthy state revenue stream, healthy budget, and we were looking to do significant programs, in particular in our education sphere. That all changed with the shutdown. That all changed with the reliance on sales tax and business taxes, and California budget saw, some estimates have a $50 billion hit to our revenue. That being said, the state Senate in particular was very early on expressed to the governor that it was important that we don't shock the education system, that we figure out a way to make school districts whole for this year and not devastate them, because school districts planned for a fiscal year and we needed to stabilize that. And so we were able to convince the governor to stabilize education funding for this year. We were in a very strong position in that we had a $19 billion reserve fund that we had built up over the last several years. So we were able to use our fiscal prudence over the last decade and use a portion of our reserves to help offset some of the devastating cuts. Going forward, I don't think anybody, I like to say sort of flippantly, if anybody tells you what's going to happen on Tuesday, run away from them, because nobody knows what's going to happen on Tuesday. And certainly we don't know what the receipts are going to be for next fiscal year. And so with that in mind, we tried to bring everything inside and focus on immediate economic stimulus ideas, getting construction projects and transportation projects and moving things that were job creators as quickly as possible through the pipeline. And then, of course, the fires came. And as anybody in San Marino knows, all you have to do is open your window and, we may not, I live in La Cañada, and of course, the smoke is hitting us as well. And a lot of our neighbors are under an imminent threat. I got a tweet or text earlier today that the fire is within 500 feet of the Mount Wilson Observatory, which, is something that our community has long prized itself on having. And so certainly our prayers and our thoughts and our feelings go out to the first responders out there, fighting the devastation, and then the communities under threat of evacuation and under threat of property damage. And so these fires that California is facing are fastly becoming the largest in history. And it is going to again have a second devastation to the state's fiscal health going forward, because fighting emergencies is a core value of any government, and California is trying to do the best we can under these circumstances. In particular, August 28th, the governor announced a color-coded system for counties, purple, red, orange, and yellow. Purple being the most affected counties in the state of California. There's 38 purple counties, LA being one of them. There are 9 red counties, and purple stands for widespread COVID. Though our numbers are getting better, we're still in the purple category. There are 9 red counties, 9 orange counties, and 2 yellow counties. And there's trying to get a handle on how we can reopen our economy based on objective scientific criteria. A commercial for folks, you don't touch a fire because it burns your hand. Touching a fire and getting burnt shouldn't be a political statement. It should be common sense. So, if a mask cuts down on the spread of COVID by 80+%, seems like we should wear our masks, and not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors. And I think one of the most uniquely American things is, we're a neighborly people. We take in our neighbor's paper, we watch the neighbor's dog, we, drive the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts as good neighbors. And if practicing social distance, it makes us good neighbors, I think we should practice social distance and wear our masks, because we want to continue to cut down on COVID as much as possible. I have a daughter in Europe right now working on a movie, and she gets tested twice a week. They contact trace, they isolate the virus, and they've been able to cut down on the number of deaths and positives by, basically isolating the people who are positive and everybody practicing good practices and good testing. So, that's the challenge for California. We're so large that, we do the best we can. Specifically, as Kelly mentioned, over the years, I've spent a lot of time on public education. Last year, I was able to get the late start bill through the legislature to start high school and middle school later. And one of the reasons why I did it is there's 35 years of actual science that says when you let your teenagers sleep a little later in the morning, their test scores go up, their graduation rate goes up, and their attendance goes up. And lo and behold, their depression and suicide goes down. So we have a scientific way to increase test scores and lower suicide. Sign me up for that. I don't know why it was controversial, because there's 35 years of actual bona fide peer-reviewed science and data to show that teenagers require 10 hours of sleep and get about 4.5. And the more sleep they get, the healthier they are and the better they perform. And those of us who want healthy kids doing well in school supported it. The PTA was a big supporter of it, and we were able to get that through the system. I lost an older brother to suicide. And what I learned through that endeavor is people didn't talk about mental health until I had joined the club. And then once it was public that I had a family member who took their own life, then people were stopping me on the street to share their story about their brother, their sister, their aunt, their mother, their uncle, their nephew, because then I was affected by it. And it showed me that we really have to get mental health out of the shadows. And if we recognize that mental health affects every family, we'll get more treatment to more people who deserve it. This year, I was disappointed because we saw a discrepancy in the education code. that said mental health was not treated the same as physical health when it came to approved absences from school. And so imagine a teenager during the time of COVID or during a regular session who is feeling depressed and anxious and stays home from school and then has to go to class not knowing if that teacher is going to let them take a makeup test, because mental health isn't treated the same as physical health. When you sprain your ankle and you stay home, you get treated one way, but if you have bipolar or depression or anxiety, you don't get, the law doesn't say you get treated the same way. And so, I'm very, very passionate about making sure that our young people with these issues are treated well, and that we bring it out of the shadows. On my website, we brought 4 family therapists together, and we did a Q&A with them on during the COVID, how families are coping. And I tell you it, not that have you go listen to the 2-hour whole webinar, but we listed each question. And so if there's a question that you find interesting, you can click on it and go right to the answer from the 2. Each question was dealt with by 2 of the family therapists. And so go through it. Things that I had never even thought of. How is a divorced family handling, shared custody during time of COVID, and special needs kids during time of COVID. And so it was a pretty good conversation that we had. I'm love representing San Marino, though I have to say, as a La Cañada, father of La Cañada high school kids, some of the soccer games we've won and some we've lost. And so I see the communities as very similar in how we promote family activities and good camaraderie between the schools. Housing is a big issue. I know San Marino has expressed a lot of concerns over housing policy, as have I. And I work very hard to walk that balance between the need for increased housing stock and how do we do it in a way that respects local control. And as many of you know, it's a hard sweet spot to find. I think the cities have moved more so than ever before, and I think there's a sweet spot coming in the future, and I'm hoping that we find it. The county has a lot of resources. If you're questioning about the fire or COVID, don't hesitate to go to the county's website. There's been a lot of, this year there were several bills on tax policy. For those of you who are interested in tax conformity, I know, Kelly, it's on the top of your list of questions, but there may be people who are interested to see how state and federal, with all of the changes in tax law on the state side and the federal side, there were several bills on tax conformity. And so you may want to all talk to your accountants to get a handle on that. For the educators out there, please, don't hesitate to reach out to my office with specific issues affecting San Marino schools. I've routinely talked to the superintendents throughout my district, in particular have roundtables as much as possible, and really, really want to get the input from the ground level, because sometimes the specific observations help us craft policy. And being part of Senate leadership, I'm in a unique position sometimes to get things through the system in a way that can be helpful. This year, for anybody who is dealing with education finance, you should take a look at AB 835, which is tweaking how we're doing the local control funding formula to make sure resources get to the students that generate those resources. There's been a lot of talk on how we stabilize the rental housing market. So there was a bill, AB 3088, that came out to deal with that issue. So you might want to look at that and how that, for those of you who have income properties and other things, we've been trying to protect tenants, but also stabilize the market. And the Senate has had some unique ideas on that. Your chief is awesome, just in case anybody cares. He routinely reaches out to me on policy and is very progressive in his approach to policing. And so I've enjoyed a good relationship with him over the years. And it's not, for me, again, it's nice to have somebody to converse with. I think we have to be realistic and cognizant of how important it is to have police reform across our country in a way that makes sense, that respects the inherent systemic racism that we have had, And it's nice for me to have somebody who I can talk to who understands the big picture in a very progressive, pragmatic way. So that's been an asset for your community to have him, I believe, and he works very well with my office. Another important bill that went through the system this year was on ethnic studies, and a contribution that was made to the bill was to give local districts some flexibility to make sure that districts have unique ethnic local needs, that they can tailor it to meet those needs. And I use the example of, if you're in the port and you want to talk about the impact that Portuguese fishermen made to your local district, you should be able to do that, incorporate it into a ethnic studies curriculum. If you're in Fresno and you have Armenian and Filipino and Latino farmers that have contributed to your community and your culture, you should be able to incorporate that in ethnic studies. And so we were able to put a flexibility quotient. At my core, I'm a father of two daughters, a 28-year-old and an 18-year-old. I have a wonderful spouse who certainly is smarter and better than I am. And I get to be a politician because of the wonderful family that supports me in this effort. And I'm proud to be your state senator. And I know you want to have some time for questions. So I'm here if anybody has any questions.
Okay, I think we received one question through the Q&A, which is from Wally. And the question is, why do we need both a Senate and an Assembly? One legislative body would seem more efficient.
Well, there's a tradition of a bicameral legislature, just like Washington has a House and a Senate. And the theory is the smaller districts and the so the Assembly is half the size, their district. So I represent 1 million people. Ed Chow, who's your Assembly member, represents 500,000 people. He runs every 2 years. Senators run every 4 years. And so it was modeled on the same model as the federal government, where you have the House, which is commonly called the People's House, and then you have the upper house, which is the Senate. California has the same, what we call bicameral model. And then rather than having the president be the chief executive, we have the governor as our chief executive. And so it's a similar system. There's 120 of us. Having two houses, two bodies, the push and the pull generally yields, in my opinion, a better product than if it was just one system, because you really have to, it's very interesting in that both houses have their own sets of rules, their own protocols, their own procedures. We like to be the upper house in the Senate, and we have a much more deliberative body, and we do everything by voice vote. In the Assembly, they do computer voting, and I think it yields better work product when you have two sets of eyes going through something, in my opinion. But a good question.
All right, we've got a couple of questions here. One is there any plan to redirect resources from the bullet train to other more current needs?
That is probably one of the most asked questions in the past decade. I really don't. I think the train has so much institutional inertia. Obviously it was Governor Brown's top priority. I think his father built the UC system, and he wanted to build a world-class light rail, rapid train. And, I just think there's too much inertia. There was efforts this year to divert some of the money to deal with some of the transportation needs in LA County and Orange County. I support those efforts to try to be smart with our transportation dollars. But I think the train, in and of itself in the Central Valley, at least for this first leg, there's a lot of inertia on it. One good thing is SB1, constitutionally, none of those dollars can be used for the high-speed rail. So there was a recognition from the state 3 years ago that in the past, we have not always been righteous with transportation dollars, and especially during the Great Recession between 2007 and 2012, a lot of transportation dollars were diverted from transportation projects. And so with SB1, there was a built-in protection that those transportation dollars cannot be diverted for anything other than the projects they're intended for. And in particular, they can't be diverted to pay for the high-speed rail. And I think that was a recognition of just how fundamentally unpopular the high-speed rail had become in certain segments. So I think there's good and there's bad within it. I think there's a recognition of the legislature that we had to assure the public that the future transportation dollars had integrity. And I think we've done that. I think anybody who drives around the San Gabriel Valley sees signs that said brought to you by, SB1. I think we've tried to be, very responsible with those dollars going forward. Unfortunately, with the high-speed rail, my preference would have been to go from Burbank to Las Vegas with it. But, prior to my, being in the legislature, there was so much interest from the Central Valley. And, what's lost in the conversation is a lot of that was bipartisan support. And the idea was that it would bring economic development through the Central Valley and connect into the Bay Area. And, unfortunately became a partisan issue, but in its early stages, it was very much supported on a bipartisan basis. I think the mismanagement of it is, horrendous. And I don't know why there haven't been, forensic accounting and, if I were king, I would certainly have a lot more oversight and forensic accounting of why it's so overrun and has hit so many problems. And I think those are legitimate questions for the public to ask. And, I think we have to continue to have integrity with our future transportation dollars and then make sure that we don't waste more on bad processes. I'm sorry, I'm Italian. I give long answers.
Thank you. The next question comes from our mayor, Gretchen. She asked,
Hey, Mayor.
welcome and thanks to Senator Portantino for speaking with us in San Marino. It's my pleasure to virtually see you again. And I would like to thank you for your hard work on behalf of our community, as well as the many communities in the 25th District. My question concerns, where do you see the future of legislation mandating multi-unit residential development in single-family resident cities like San Marino? And when will there be a requirement that it is affordable? Also, how can the city of San Marino best protect its residents' interests and retain as much local control over such development? No, the related bills did not pass last month, but will they be introduced again next year? Thank you, Mayor Gretchen Shepherd-Romey.
Mayor, it's the best question. It really is the heart of the matter. There's no question that California needs more housing to meet the demands. We also need more affordable housing. And so you hit the two nails on the head. Many of the housing proposals have not had safeguards to make sure that the actual housing produced will be affordable. And the theory has been if you increase production of market rate housing, that'll trickle down into the market and create affordable housing. I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory because trickle down economics hasn't worked just about every time it's ever been tried. I don't know why trickle down housing would. That being said, we desperately need more housing production. One of the challenges that the legislature has faced is there have been cities that have embraced housing production and their regional responsibility and cities that have sued Sacramento, and there hasn't been a partnership in meeting the goals. And I think that has always created an adversarial relationship between Sacramento and local government. Now, again, as a former mayor who came out of the League of Cities, I've always tried to be that bridge. And it's been hard to convince people that cities are serious about meeting their needs. And that's why this sort of overlay of density in neighborhoods, throughout, without regard to neighborhoods, has been sort of the default that Sacramento has landed on over the last couple of years. As you know, I opposed SB 50, which was the most draconian of all of those efforts. And it was my hope that in the aftermath, the League of Cities and Ernest Cities and LA County's division in the league was very proactive in putting forth proposals. And what I've been hoping for is that rather than the state tell cities how to do it, we give you a target of what to meet and we let you meet it within your own resources. It's hard to get Sacramento to trust that the cities will deliver on that. And that's why there's been this shift in the balance of power from local control to developers, because there's a lack of trust in the process. And I'm going to continue to try to bring more of that trust now that the big picture approaches have failed in the last 2 years. I'm going to try one more time to be a bridge to that. This year I was able to get a number of amendments into the bills that made them better. They didn't make them good, they made them better. But I'm hoping now that the big, the overreach efforts have not gone through, that there's an appetite for that prudent conversation between local governments. Now, that's going to be painful. If the state comes in to San Marino and says, you have to build X number of units, under the old rules, all you had to do was plan for them. And so cities would plan for them and never build them. But if the state says you now have to build them or there will be consequences, is that a better approach than the state saying, taking the local control away? I believe it is. I think, creating responsibility and accountability is better than mandating a legislation that puts the developers in charge. And so that's what I'm going to be continuing to push for. But there's no question we need the production. The other sort of sociological fight has been between homeownership and renters. And again, we have the San Gabriel Valley because that's where people went to get a piece of the American dream, to have first-time home ownership. Similar to why Long Island, New York exists. Communities that progressed through their economic development from urban communities in Manhattan to the Jersey Shore and to Long Island. It's the same why we have the San Gabriel Valley. And so we have to do more, in my opinion, to encourage first-time home buying programs, subsidies to help people. And part of that is density and creating townhomes and unique opportunities. But I am deathly afraid of creating a market where we're only creating renters, because the single biggest way to help economic development for a family is to create property ownership. People who have been here for a long time, people who have families who have acquired property and wealth and businesses, they have that. But so much of California are new people to our state, new families to our state. And the best way to help them acquire some wealth and prosperity is through home ownership and equity. So, that's the other challenge, is in the way we're legislating is we're encouraging renters when we should be creating affordable housing for purchases and more rental properties at the same time. So it's probably the biggest quagmire that the state has going forward. And I'm hoping that we can get a production bill through that sort of hits the sweet spot. But there has to be a little bit of pain on all sides, because that's the only way we're going to get what both the communities want, which is a seat at the table, and what the state wants, which is more production.
Thank you. We got a couple more questions. I'm going to try to combine two of them because they pertain to school funding. The first one is, can you talk more about the work you're doing to provide more funding for special education services, given the lack of federal funding and the increasing encroachment on local school district funds? And I'm going to try to combine that with public school funding today is crucial to our state's successful future. How can we achieve an increase in per student funding at the base level received by San Marino Unified School District?
Well, I wish I was asked those questions last year, because I had wonderful answers to both of them. I mean, last year I actually requested an increase in special ed funding in a number of categories, and was able to get that in the state budget. And the last 2 years, I was able to get the base COLA for the local control funding formula increased 2 years in a row. So those are both questions in my wheelhouse. And I agree, Governor Brown, when he created the local control funding formula, had a great idea. Let's spend money where it's needed. And I don't think anybody would agree or disagree with that approach, that if there are districts that needed, supplemental and concentration grants and extra dollars, that those districts should get it. The problem was in 2000, when was it, 2010? No, I'm sorry, 2014, I think. Whenever local control started, the base was set too low. And so districts like just about every district in the San Gabriel Valley did not get a base funding level that was at the 2007 level. We just recently got, when you adjust for inflation, got close to the 2007 funding level. And so that was the challenge. Whoever asked that question is 100% correct. The base was set too low, which is why when I got elected to the Senate, I actually requested to chair the budget subcommittee on education and made increasing the base my priority for my first 3 years in the Senate. And I was able to accomplish that 2 out of those 3 years, and increase the COLA significantly and increase the base funding. Prospectively, I wish I could tell you, I'd love to tell you that next year there's going to be more money for special ed and more money for schools. I can't make that promise or that commitment because nobody knows what our tax receipts are going to be. And your question is spot on, and I don't really have the answer you want right now because I don't know what the tax receipts are going to be. I also agree with your basic thesis. The more we spend on education, the more we save everywhere else. We spend on third graders, we help the overall health and welfare of the economy. We spend on community colleges and we graduate more people with certificates, the more homeowners we're going to create. I mean, it's all interrelated, and it all comes back to education and opportunity. And that's why I do what I do.
And we have 2 more questions. Can you comment on the state tax changes that may result from the economic slowdown and how that may affect school funding from the state?
Well, I can't talk about the actual tax law piece because that's not my wheelhouse. But if the state collects less money, there's going to be less money to be spent. I mean, and a city like San Marino gets a certain amount of money from sales tax. So if the businesses are closed, there's going to be less sales tax. It's the same for the state of California. The less people drive, the less gas tax. The less people consume, the less sales tax. If property values change, it's all interrelated to the overall health and welfare of the economy. And buy as much takeout food as you can, shop local, be safe, wear your mask. And as I tell my daughter, who during COVID was complaining about a project she was working on, I said, what a great problem to have during this unprecedented times. You're being paid to have that difficult task.
And it looks like the last question that we have is, what is the state looking to do about addressing pension liabilities?
Well, the governor put some money in the budget this year to help offset, in particular with school districts, their pension liabilities. Governor Brown pushed through a pension reform about 8 years ago, but there were not big proposals other than trying to offset the obligation for the school districts and the reforms that Governor Brown put in. So again, I don't have the solution that the person who asked the question probably wants me to say. I'm an odd politician. If I don't know, I don't make it up.
All right. Well, Lauren, I think you just sent me a text. I think you could just go ahead and ask your question.
Gotta unmute yourself, Lauren.
Usually people are telling me to mute myself, so this was a welcome change. Thank you. Obviously, building more housing is good. helps the economy, it helps people out. And what I'm seeing where I live, we're seeing more building and we're seeing more businesses coming in to address the added population. What I'm not seeing is more streets or wider streets. And the congestion is just getting worse and worse, at least in the cities that I go through. What's the plan?
Well, I think, not to pick on Alhambra for a second, but, Alhambra, fought the 710 freeway forever, but continued to overdevelop on infrastructure that wasn't built for that infrastructure. I think, one of the things with local control is you want to, make sure that the folks who are making those local density decisions are putting it in the right place and making sure there's a right uh, infrastructure for it, that if it's downtown, that there's enough parking, if it's close to transit, that you take into consideration, so we have to be smarter with our development. One of the things that the bill that I was heartbroken over that died on the last night because the clock ran out on us is I had a bill, SB 1299, to incentivize turning vacant retail into housing. So much of what cities have done is the monetization of land use. Cities get sales tax revenue exponentially greater than they do property tax revenue. And so there's always been a disincentive to build housing and go for retail. And with all of the retail that's empty and vacant and strip malls and malls and there's lots of vacant property, and cities will sit and wait for the next target to come in and not build housing. So I had a bill to give cities the actual tax revenue that they would have generated had it been a retail model, but only if they build workforce housing to, again, incentivize workforce housing by offsetting city sales tax revenue. So I think we have to be creative, but we also have to, have better planning on the local level. For La Cañada, for years, the sports chalet development was a big contentious issue for 30 years. And it went from a human scale to an inhuman scale back to a human scale. And, I think had that one, 9-story development been built, what it would have done to the center of the town. And, it took different elected officials had different views of what density should be. And I think that's, where citizen engagement can be. And we finally brought together the community and did a series of community charrettes and did community-based planning to figure out the final successful plan. And so I think the more we open up the process, the better it is. But there is a housing shortage in the state of California, and it's going to have to be addressed. And I would rather it be addressed through incentives and partnerships. But that's going to require cities to be a willing participant in that conversation.
Steve, I think one more slipped in there.
That is true. Who is driving the density targets, and are the density targets being revisited in light of COVID?
I just saw in the paper that Pasadena is challenging their numbers. The Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, is doling out the density numbers. And my fear is that we create targets that can't be met. And so it blows up the whole theory of trying to create a doable target. And that's, part of what we need to do is get people involved in local government and get people involved in regional government to articulate, what can and can't be done. And I know for just using Pasadena as an example, they're feeling that the number that was assigned to them is just undoable. And that's a community that's invested millions of dollars in transit-oriented development and in density. And they're saying they can't meet that number. So we have to come up with doable numbers. Again, part of the challenge has been for the past 30 years, when cities have gotten their regional housing or their housing plans approved, they've always done it in a theoretical context, not in a practical context. And so they planned to build the housing and never built it, and we haven't kept pace with the need. Whoever brought up the post-COVID question, I think, Lauren, it was part of yours, is the world is going to be a lot different post-COVID. And I think we're going to have to take a breath and evaluate. I mean, are people who have been working at home, I mean, is the traditional get in your car at 7:15, driving to work model of life going to come back? Or are we going to have a lot more remote businesses? Is the 9 to 5 era of business, is it going to change? And the more mobile you get, or the more you don't have to be in the office, you can basically live anywhere if that's the case. And so, look at tonight, we got 48 people on Zoom on the meeting. I mean, this social, digital world is going to be here post-COVID, and I think it's going to change a lot of the work in migratory and housing policies. So, I think evaluating that over the next 6 months to a year would make better decisions. Whether or not there's an appetite to take a breath, that I can't tell you, but I think it's a prudent, sound question to ask.
Steve, you have one more you want to call it?
This might be more of a commentary, but the question is, how about adding 2 lanes to the I-5 instead of trains to nowhere?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I think we beat that puppy to death.
Well, Senator, thank you so very much. Obviously, you're a very busy guy, and we appreciate you giving us your time here. I know I certainly heard some things of which I was not aware. So we really appreciate that, and hopefully one of these days we can corral you back here again. But meantime, hope all goes well with you. Stay healthy, and again, we thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And again, remember, David is part of the team, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And to the mayor and council members, thanks for representing your community so well. As a former small town government official, it's a tough job, and you guys do it well. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Anthony.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so a reminder, our next meeting, October 20th, we'll find out what's going on in places far, far away. And so thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it, and you all stay safe and healthy.
Right.